You don't need to keep explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Am I communicating clearly, or am I trying to earn permission to be honest? Sit with that for a bit, because a lot of people don't over explain because they love talking. They over explain because somewhere along the way they learned they wouldn't be believed no matter how well they explained it. They learned that they had to prove their motives. They learned they had to soften the truth or not say it at all. But even that gets twisted. They learned they had to explain every detail so no one could accuse them of being selfish, rude, or dramatic, intimidating, or cruel. They learned that being misunderstood could cost them. It could cost them connection, safety, approval, their reputation, a relationship, a place in the family, a place in the church, and often their sense that they were still a good person. So now, instead of saying what they mean and allowing other people to respond however they want to respond, they explain and explain and explain some more. They add another paragraph, another example, another perspective, another apology, and another reason. They try to make the truth softer, safer, and less upsetting. They try to anticipate every possible objection before the other person has even responded, and often they have replayed the conversation hours, even days before. And by the end of the conversation, they're exhausted and confused. The boundary that could have been 2 sentences became a 20-minute defense. The simple no became an entire case presented before a judge. The honest feeling became something they needed permission to have. And I don't even want to say how many times this was my reality. I understand this all too well because I've lived it for decades. There's been seasons in my life when I explained myself until I was completely exhausted. Not because I didn't know what I meant. I knew what I meant, but every sentence got twisted into something that was never said. But I explained some more because I wanted someone else to finally see my heart. I wanted them to understand that I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. I wanted to stop hurting myself. I wanted them to know I was doing the best I could. I wanted them to understand how I arrived at the choices I made. I wanted them to stop twisting what I said. I wanted them to stop using parts of my history as proof that I couldn't be trusted. And after my marriage ended, there were so many stories told about me, labels, whispers, sideway looks, people who form conclusions without ever asking me what happened. And when you know people are discussing you, judging you, or accepting versions of you that leaves out most of the truth, there's a powerful urge to explain everything, to tell your entire story, to make people understand, to defend your heart, to correct every false statement, to prove that you're not who someone said you are. And that desire makes sense. Being misrepresented hurts, especially when the people believing the story matter to you, when some of them knew you and you call them friends, especially when silence is interpreted as guilt, but speaking is interpreted as defensiveness and you can't win. You begin feeling trapped all over again. If I say nothing, they'll believe it. If I speak up, they'll say I'm attacking someone. If I tell the whole story, they'll say I'm bitter and unforgiving. If I leave details out, they won't understand or later say I was lying. So you keep explaining. But here's what I had to learn. Some people aren't confused because you haven't explained clearly enough. Sometimes they've accepted the version that allows them to avoid discomfort. Sometimes they don't want the additional information because receiving it would require them to question someone they trusted, or question a system, a family story, a religious teaching, their own silence and choices, or it might require them to stand up to them as well. And it's much easier doing nothing, and doing nothing is all it takes for abuse to continue. And no amount of perfect wording can force someone to confront what they've decided not to see. You can communicate clearly, kindly, honestly, and someone can still choose not to receive it. That doesn't automatically mean your communication failed. Sometimes the other person simply doesn't agree. Sometimes they don't have the emotional capacity to receive what you're saying. Sometimes they're defensive, or the truth threatens an arrangement that benefits them. Sometimes they genuinely heard you, but they interpret the situation differently. And sometimes, yes, you may not have communicated as clearly as you thought. That distinction matters because they're committed to misunderstanding me can become an excuse we use whenever someone challenges us. Not everyone who disagrees with you is committed to misunderstanding you. Not everyone who asks questions is attacking you. Not everyone who sees your behavior differently is trying to control you. Sometimes the other person has a valid point. Sometimes your tone was hurtful. Sometimes your message wasn't clear. Sometimes you hinted, expected them to know what you meant, and then became angry because they didn't understand. Sometimes you're so focused on explaining your intention that you refuse to hear the impact. So, healthy communication requires humility. You can ask yourself, did I clearly say what I meant? Did I listen to understand their perspective? Is there something there I need to own? Am I defending my intention while ignoring the harm my actions caused? Those are important questions. And once you have listened, clarified, taken responsibility, corrected what belongs to you, and communicated your decision honestly, you're allowed to stop. Humility doesn't mean surrendering the truth every time someone dislikes it. Your responsibility is to communicate clearly, listen honestly, and own what belongs to you. Their responsibility is what they choose to do with what you've said. You can remain teachable without defending yourself for 20 minutes every time someone is disappointed. That's where healthy influence begins. Not controlling, not forcing people to listen, not making people agree, not carrying responsibility for every reaction. Influence is how you show up. Your words, your tone, your presence, your boundaries, your example. Your willingness to remain honest when someone would prefer you to return to silence. Influence is whether the way you speak and live matches the person you're becoming. When over-explaining is really an attempt to control. That may sound strange because over-explaining often feels submissive. It feels like we're trying to be kind, but underneath it, over-explaining can become an attempt to control the outcome. We keep talking because we want the other person to respond a certain way. We want them to say, oh, now I understand. You're right. You're not selfish. You're a good person. I'm not upset anymore. We tell ourselves we're simply communicating, but we may actually be trying to prevent their disappointment, their anger, their judgment, their distance, their version of the story. And that's not fully within our control. You can make your message clear. You can choose your timing. You can speak with care. You can correct misinformation. You can apologize for what you did wrong, but you can't control what another person thinks about you. You can't control what they repeat. You can't control whether they believe your motives. You can't force someone to acknowledge your heart. And trying to do that can consume enormous amounts of energy. You replay the conversation afterward and think, I should have said it differently. I forgot this detail. Maybe if I send one more message, maybe if I explain what happened when I was younger, maybe if they understand why I reacted. Maybe if I tell them how hard I tried. Sometimes more context is helpful, but sometimes the other person has already heard enough. The problem isn't missing information. The problem is that they don't like your answer. You said no. They pushed, so you added a reason. They questioned the reason, so you added more details. And now you're defending your right to make a decision they were never going to approve of. A complete sentence can absolutely be no. A complete sentence might also be, I can't do that this week. You can give appropriate context, but you don't have to keep adding reasons until they finally agree that your no is acceptable. Clear communication gives information. Over-explaining often asks for permission. And if you've spent years being the peacekeeper, the fixer, the quiet one, or the person who needed to be liked, this can feel deeply uncomfortable. Because alignment may disappoint people who benefited from the old version of you, the version who answered immediately, the version who said yes before checking your capacity, the version who stayed quiet, the version who took responsibility for everyone's feelings. the version who explained until the other person felt better, the version who carried more than you can handle, the version who made everything easier for everyone, even while it was destroying you. When that version begins changing, people notice. They may say, "You're different. You've changed. You're cold. You used to care more. You used to be more understanding. You're making everything about yourself." And sometimes there may be truth in that concern. Maybe you've become reactive. Maybe your boundaries are coming out harshly because you waited until you were completely resentful. Maybe you're so determined not to be controlled that you stop considering anyone else. Remain willing to examine yourself and also recognize this. Some people call a boundary unloving because they were comfortable with your lack of one. Some people call you difficult because guilt no longer produces the same response. The reaction is information. It is not automatically instruction. What are you teaching people? Your life is always influencing something. Your silence teaches something. Your yes teaches something. Your boundaries teach something. Your tone, your consistency, the way you treat yourself all teaches something. That can sound heavy, but it isn't about becoming perfect. It's about becoming honest. Because people don't only learn from what you say, they learn from what you repeatedly allow, what you model, what you excuse, what you apologize for, what you repair, what you keep doing after you've said it needs to change. If you keep saying you need rest but never protect it, that's teaching them something. What you keep doing after you've said it needs to change. If you keep saying you need rest but never protect it, that teaches something. If you say honesty matters but avoid every difficult conversation, that teaches something. If you say your peace matters but give constant access to people who repeatedly destroy it, that teaches something. If you say a behavior isn't acceptable but there's never any change in your response when it happens again, that teaches something. And I'm saying this as someone who has had to look at this in my own life over and over. There were many times I wanted people to treat me differently while I kept showing them that my boundaries were negotiable. I would say, "This can't keep happening." Then it happened again and again. I explained why it hurt. I begged for them to change. I hoped they understood. I accepted another promise. I caved after another guilt trip. I returned to the same pattern, and then I was devastated when words didn't create change. That's uncomfortable to admit because the other person was still responsible for their behavior, but I had to become responsible for what I continue doing with the information I already had. A boundary isn't only something you say. It's something you're prepared to honor through your own choices. Your influence grows when your actions begin matching your words. Influence begins with ownership, not blame, ownership. How am I showing up? What am I modeling? What am I making normal? What am I expecting people to understand that I haven't clearly communicated? That last question gets a lot of us. We expect people to know. We expect people to notice. We expect them to understand the cost. We expect them to see how tired we are. We expect them to know we're overwhelmed. We expect them to recognize that our yes wasn't really a yes. But people can't reliably respond to what we refuse to say clearly. They may see that you look tired. They may still not know what help you need. They may know you've had a hard week. They may still not know that you've reached your limit. And let's be real here. We taught them we keep going anyway. They may hear you say, "I'm fine," and believe you. And then you become angry because they didn't understand that fine meant I'm barely holding myself together. And I need you to notice without making me ask. And I get that. Asking often comes with more energy required of you to explain. Sometimes you want someone to notice because you're exhausted from having to ask. You want to know that someone cares enough to pay attention. That's human. But hinting and hoping and then resenting isn't clear communication. At some point, you may need to say, "I need help. I can't do that this week. I need time before I answer. That doesn't work for me. I'm willing to help with this part, but I can't carry all of it. I need this conversation to remain respectful or it's over. I care about you, but I'm not continuing this same argument. And that's influence, not because you control their response, because you're showing up aligned with your values. You don't need to tell everyone everything. Another part of stopping over-explaining is learning that not everyone is entitled to the whole story. That was difficult for me because when people misunderstand you, you may think the solution is to tell them more history, more pain, more private details, more evidence. But access to your story should be earned through trust, not demanded through accusations. Some people ask questions because they genuinely care about you. They want to understand. Other people ask questions because they want information they can debate, repeat, minimize, or later use against you. Discernment matters. You don't owe every curious person your most painful details. You don't need to reopen every wound to convince someone that the wound was real. You can say there's more to the situation than I'm willing to discuss. I've made this decision after a great deal of thought. I'm not sharing those details. Silence can be avoidance, but silence can also be discernment. The difference is whether you're hiding from a truth you need to face or protecting something that isn't safe to share in that space. Healthy influence isn't always soft. Sometimes the influence requires challenge. If you're a parent, coach, leader, friend, partner, or anyone whose life touches another person's life, there'll be times when love requires honesty, not harshness, not humiliation, not control, honesty. You may need to say, I see a pattern here and I care enough to mention it. I don't think that choice is helping you. This is affecting the people around you. You keep saying you want something different, but your choices are keeping the same pattern alive. I believe you're capable of taking responsibility for this. That kind of influence can be powerful, but the motive and tone matters. Are you saying it to help them see or to prove you're right? Are you inviting responsibility or trying to force change? Are you speaking from care or unloading frustration? Are you willing to listen or have you already decided you know everything? Truth without humility can become self-righteousness, but humility without truth can become enabling. Healthy influence requires both. And then you have to release control. You can offer the truth, model it, invite, encourage, challenge, support, and ask good questions, but you can't make another person change. That can be painful when you love them. I know what it's like to want someone to see what you see, to want them to choose differently, to want them to stop repeating the same destructive pattern, to want them to understand what their choices are costing them. And as a mother, that becomes especially difficult. You want to protect your children. You want to spare them pain. You want to correct every wrong conclusion. You want them to understand your heart. You want to repair what you can. You may want so badly for them to know, I loved you deeply, even in the places where my unhealed pain affected you. But love doesn't allow me to demand that they understand me on my timeline. Influence means I can tell the truth. I can apologize without defending myself. I can listen to their experience without insisting that my intention erase their pain. I can make repairs where repairs are possible. I can model change, but I can't force trust to return. I can't force someone to see me differently because I'm ready to be seen differently. That belongs to them. And accepting that is part of accountability too. You can invite growth. You can't force it. Sometimes the most influential thing you can do is stop rescuing someone from the consequences they keep choosing. That sentence can sound harsh, but rescuing often looks loving while teaching something destructive. You fix the problem, cover the cost, make the excuse, repair the relationship, take over the responsibility, protect them from every uncomfortable result. And because you love them, you believe you're helping. But sometimes you're teaching them, you don't have to take ownership. I'll take care of it. That doesn't mean you become cold. It doesn't mean you never help. It doesn't mean you watch someone suffer when appropriate support could make a difference. It means you ask, is my help strengthening this person or is my help allowing the pattern to continue? Sometimes influence is asking a Question instead of solving the problem. What do you think you need to do next? What part of this belongs to you? What have you learned? What are you willing to change? How can I support you without taking this over? That's very different from rescuing. Another part of influence is modeling. Your life may speak more loudly than your advice. If you want your children to have boundaries, they need to see you practice boundaries. If you want people to speak honestly, they need to see you speak honestly. If you want others to take responsibility, they need to see you take responsibility. And no, that won't guarantee others will, but that's not in your control. If you want people to live with purpose, they need to see you stop treating your purpose like the leftovers of your life. If you want peace, they need to see you stop feeding chaos. If you want people to trust God, they also need to see that faith doesn't require denial. That's not perfection, it's modeling. And yes, you'll still overexplain sometimes, you'll shrink sometimes, you'll hint instead of asking directly. You'll become defensive, you'll try to manage the other person's reaction, you'll say too much and later wish you'd stopped sooner. That doesn't mean you failed, it means you noticed. Take responsibility, correct what needs correcting, and return to alignment. Influence grows through consistency, not perfection. This week, when you feel the urge to overexplain, pause. Before answering, ask, what am I trying to communicate? What's the actual message? Can you say it clearly in 1 or 2 sentences? What am I afraid they'll think about me? That I'm selfish, unkind, difficult, weak, unforgiving, a bad parent, a bad Christian? What identity are you trying to defend? Does this person need more information, or have they already received enough information and simply don't like the answer? Is there something I need to own? Did you communicate poorly? Did your actions cause harm? Do you owe clarification or an apology? What part of their response belongs to them? Their disappointment, their disagreement, their choice to gossip, their refusal to listen, their decision about what they believe? Then choose a clear response. I'm not able to do that. I need time to think. I've explained my decision. I've apologized for what belongs to me. I'm not discussing private details. That's all I'm going to say about it. And then stop. Let the silence exist. Let them feel the disappointment. Let them ask another question without giving them another 10-minute explanation. You can listen. You can respond thoughtfully, but you don't have to keep proving your right to exist honestly. You don't need to keep over-explaining yourself to people who aren't really listening. But don't use that sentence to avoid humility. Communicate clearly, listen carefully, own your impact, apologize when you need to, correct what belongs to you, give appropriate context, and then release the outcome. You're responsible for your words, your tone, your boundaries, your choices, your consistency, your example. You're not responsible for forcing another person to understand. Healthy influence isn't control. It's showing up with truth, care, steadiness, humility, and alignment. It's letting your words match your actions. It's allowing people to carry their own response. It's helping without rescuing. It's challenging without humiliating. It's apologizing without demanding immediate forgiveness. It's setting a boundary without defending it for 20 minutes. If this teaching helped you, start with a 5-day identity rebuild. It'll help you recognize the pattern, name the belief underneath it, and begin choosing from the person you're becoming. You'll find the link in the description. And if you're ready to go deeper, join me for the Rebuild Your Identity Masterclass or book a call with me. All links in the description. Because you can't build a new life from an old identity. And you can't influence well while abandoning yourself to keep everyone else comfortable.